A single gunshot shattered the evening calm of Willow Creek as Abigail Kennedy clutched her leather satchel and ran down the darkened street, her tattered dress catching on a hitching post as she fled from the saloon. It was 1876, and the promise of a new life in Colorado territory had just collapsed around her like a poorly built mining shaft. Behind her, angry voices echoed her new husband of just 6 hours, Theodore Wilkes, shouting that she was worthless, that the marriage had been a mistake after discovering her family's homestead was worthless and debt-ridden. Abigail's chest heaved as she paused at the edge of town, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. At 22, she had believed Theodore's promises of love and security. Now, as the night air chilled her skin, she realized those promises were as empty as the satchel she carried. Everything of value had been taken from her, even her mother's silver locket. "I have nothing," she whispered to the vast darkness stretching before her. "Absolutely nothing." The sound of approaching horses sent her scrambling behind a water trough. 3 riders passed, likely heading to the saloon where Theodore was undoubtedly gambling away what little money remained from her father's estate. When they disappeared from view, Abigail rose on shaky legs and headed toward the livery stable. She needed to get away anywhere before Theodore realized she had fled. The livery was dark, but a single lantern burned in the back where a tall figure worked methodically, brushing down a chestnut mare. Abigail hesitated in the doorway, unsure whether to retreat or advance. "Stables closed," the man said without turning around, his voice deep and steady like distant thunder. "Come back at dawn if you're looking for a horse." I need help," Abigail managed, her voice barely audible. The man turned then, the lantern light revealing a weathered face with kind eyes beneath the brim of a worn cowboy hat. He couldn't have been more than 30, with broad shoulders and hands that spoke of hard work and harder living. "Miss, you look like you've seen the devil himself," he said, setting down his brush and approaching slowly. "I'm Mitch Brewer, most folks call me Mitch." "Abigail Kennedy," she replied automatically, then winced. "Though it's Wilkes now, I suppose, at least for the moment." Mitch's eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance, the torn dress, the trembling hands, the bruise forming on her cheek where Theodore had struck her when she'd tried to stop him from taking her father's pocket watch. "You're running from something," he stated simply. Abigail nodded, too exhausted to lie. "My husband. We were married this afternoon, and by evening he'd shown his true colors." Mitch's jaw tightened. "Theodore Wilkes," her eyes widened in surprise. "You know him." "Everyone around these parts knows Wilkes. He's left a trail of debts and broken promises from Kansas to California." Mitch hesitated, then added, "And you wouldn't be the first bride he's disappointed." The revelation hit Abigail like a physical blow. She sank onto a nearby bale of hay, her legs no longer able to support her weight. "I've been such a fool." "No," Mitch said firmly, crouching before her. "Men like Wilkes are practiced at deception. It's not your fault." A commotion erupted outside, shouting voices and the sound of running boots. Abigail tensed, recognizing Theodore's angry bellows among them. "He's looking for me," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. Without hesitation, Mitch extinguished the lantern and took her hand. "Come with me." He led her through the stable to a small door at the back, then to a modest cabin just beyond. Once inside, he moved quickly, gathering supplies and stuffing them into saddlebags. "I can't stay here," Abigail protested. "I'll bring trouble to your doorstep." "You're not staying," Mitch replied, handing her a woolen coat that dwarfed her slender frame. "We're leaving." "We." The word hung between them, filled with question. Mitch's expression was resolute. "I've been meaning to head north to my brother's place near Durango, been putting it off too long." He met her eyes. "Wilkes doesn't strike me as a man who gives up easily. You'll be safer with company." "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Mitch paused in his preparations. "My sister was once in your position. No one helped her." Something dark passed over his features. "I wasn't there when she needed me. I won't make that mistake again." Within minutes, Mitch had 2 horses saddled and ready. He helped Abigail mount a gentle gray mare, then swung himself atop his chestnut stallion. "We'll head north through the canyon," he explained in hushed tones. "It's rough terrain, but Wilkes won't expect that route. We can make good distance before sunrise." Abigail glanced back at the town of Willow Creek, the place where her dreams had turned to dust in a matter of hours. "I have nothing to offer you in return," she said quietly. "I came with empty hands." Mitch's eyes softened in the moonlight. Sometimes empty hands are exactly what's needed to start anew. With that, they nudged their horses forward into the night, leaving behind the sounds of Theodore's search party growing fainter with each passing moment. The journey through the canyon was treacherous in the dark, but Mitch navigated with the confidence of someone who knew the land intimately. Abigail clung to her saddle, fighting exhaustion and the persistent ache in her heart. By dawn, they had emerged onto a high plateau, the sunrise painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold. "We'll rest here briefly," Mitch announced, dismounting and helping Abigail from her horse. Her legs buckled, unaccustomed to such prolonged riding, and Mitch caught her easily. "I'm sorry," she murmured, embarrassed by her weakness. "No need for apologies," he replied, steadying her. "You've had quite a night." They shared a simple breakfast of jerky and hard biscuits from Mitch's saddlebag. Abigail ate ravenously, suddenly aware of how long it had been since her last meal. "How did you come to be in Willow Creek?" Mitch asked as they ate. Abigail sighed, watching the sunrise spread across the mountains. "My father died 6 months ago. The drought took our crops and debts took everything else. Theodore seemed like salvation, a successful businessman looking for a bride." She laughed bitterly. "He spoke so beautifully about building a life together, and instead he stripped you of whatever you had left," Mitch finished. "Yes." Abigail touched her bare neck where her mother's locket should have been. "I truly have nothing now." Mitch studied her thoughtfully. "You have your courage. Not many would have walked away from a man like that, especially with nowhere to go." His words warmed something inside her, a small spark in the emptiness. "Where exactly are we headed?" "My brother Marcus runs a modest cattle operation near Durango. It's about 4 days' ride from here if the weather holds." Mitch glanced at the clear sky. "He's a good man." "His wife, Sarah, will welcome you." "And then what?" Abigail asked, voicing the question that had been haunting her since they'd left Willow Creek. Mitch stood, brushing crumbs from his worn denims. "That's for you to decide, but you'll have time and safety to make that choice." They continued their journey through the day, Mitch pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the land. He had been a cowboy since he was 15, working cattle drives and breaking horses across Colorado and Wyoming. Now, at 28, he was considering settling in one place, perhaps joining his brother's operation. "It's a hard life," he admitted as they made camp that evening. "But there's something honest about it. The land doesn't lie to you, and neither do the animals." "Unlike people," Abigail added softly. Mitch nodded, stoking their small fire. "Some people, yes, but not all." As the days passed, Abigail found herself growing stronger physically from the riding and emotionally from Mitch's quiet companionship. He never pressed her to talk, but listened intently when she chose to share. She told him about growing up on her family's farm in Kansas, about her mother's death when Abigail was 16, about the dreams she'd once had of becoming a schoolteacher before responsibility to the farm took precedence. On the third night, as they camped beside a clear stream, Abigail confessed her deepest fear. "What if Theodore finds me? He's not the type to accept defeat." Mitch was silent for a long moment, turning a stick in the fire. "Men like Theodore are dangerous because they believe they own what they touch. But you're not property, Abigail. You're a person with choices." "Choices?" She looked down at her empty hands. "What choices do I have now? More than you might think." Mitch's gaze was steady. "You're smart, resilient. I've watched you adapt to trail life in days, seen you handle that mare like you've been riding for years." Abigail blushed at the unexpected praise. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." "And that," Mitch said with conviction, "is exactly why you'll be all right." Doing what needs doing is how we survive out here." Their conversation was interrupted by a distant rumble, not thunder, but the unmistakable sound of approaching riders. Mitch was on his feet instantly, extinguishing the fire and gathering their belongings. "Could be anyone," he said, though his expression betrayed his concern. "But we won't take chances." They rode through the night, pushing the horses harder than before. By morning, they had reached a dense forest where Mitch finally allowed them to rest in a well-hidden clearing. "We're close to my brother's land now," he explained, spreading his bedroll for Abigail. "Get some sleep, I'll keep watch." Exhausted, Abigail didn't argue. She fell into a deep sleep, waking hours later to find Mitch still vigilant, his rifle across his knees. "You haven't slept," she observed, sitting up. "I'll sleep when we're safe at Marcus's," he replied, offering her water from his canteen. Abigail studied him, the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the stubble darkening his jaw, the unwavering determination in his posture. Something stirred within her, a feeling she wasn't ready to name. "Why are you really helping me, Mitch?" she asked. "It can't just be because of your sister." Mitch considered her question, his eyes meeting hers directly. "When I saw you in that stable, you reminded me of something I'd forgotten." "What's that?" "That courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, like a woman leaving everything behind rather than living a lie." He smiled slightly. "Plus, you looked like you might punch me if I didn't help." Abigail laughed despite herself, the sound startling after so many days of tension. "I might have." They reached Marcus Brewer's ranch the following afternoon. The property sprawled across a lush valley with a solid log house and several outbuildings nestled against the backdrop of the mountains. Cattle grazed on distant hillsides, and a thin plume of smoke rose from the house's chimney. As they approached, a tall man who bore a striking resemblance to Mitch emerged from the barn, followed by a golden retriever that bounded toward them, barking excitedly. "Mitch." Marcus called, striding forward to greet them. "We weren't expecting you for another month." The brothers embraced warmly, then Marcus turned curious eyes to Abigail. Mitch quickly explained their situation, keeping his voice low enough that only his brother could hear the details. Marcus's expression hardened momentarily, then softened as he extended a hand to Abigail. "Any friend of my brother's is welcome here, Mrs. Wilkes. Please just call me Abigail," she requested, dismounting with Mitch's assistance. Marcus nodded understandingly. "Abigail it is." "Come inside, Sarah's making stew, and there's plenty to go around." Sarah Brewer was a warm, practical woman with bright eyes and flour-dusted hands. She embraced Abigail without hesitation, as if welcoming a long-lost friend rather than a stranger. "You poor dear," she murmured, leading Abigail to the washroom. "I'll draw you a bath and find you some clean clothes. You must be exhausted." The bath was heaven after days on the trail. Abigail soaked until the water cooled, scrubbing away the dust and fear of the journey. When she emerged wearing a borrowed dress of Sarah's, taken in hastily at the waist, she found the three Brewers engaged in serious discussion around the kitchen table. They fell silent when she entered, but Mitch's expression was resolute. "We were discussing your situation," he explained. "Marcus has contacts in Denver who might be able to help with an annulment." "An annulment?" Abigail hadn't dared hope for such a possibility. Marcus nodded. "Given the circumstances, the deception, the theft of your property, there's a strong case. It won't be immediate, but it's possible." "In the meantime," Sarah added, "you're welcome to stay with us for as long as you need." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes. "I don't know how to thank you all." "There's no need," Mitch said quietly. "This is what neighbors do for each other out here." "We're hardly neighbors," Abigail pointed out. "I'm a stranger who brought trouble to your doorstep." "Not anymore," Sarah declared, serving steaming bowls of stew. "Now you're family." The word family echoed in Abigail's heart, filling spaces she thought would remain empty forever. Life at the Brewer Ranch quickly fell into a comfortable rhythm. Abigail insisted on earning her keep, helping Sarah with household tasks and learning the basics of ranch management. She discovered she had a knack for bookkeeping, a skill the Brewers sorely needed, and soon found herself organizing their chaotic financial records into a coherent system. Mitch, meanwhile, worked alongside Marcus with the cattle and horses, but Abigail often caught him watching her from across the yard or at dinner. Their conversations, once focused on survival during their journey, now meandered through dreams and memories, philosophy and simple daily pleasures. One evening, about 3 weeks after their arrival, Mitch found Abigail sitting on the porch, staring at the sunset. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling beside her on the wooden steps. "I was thinking about how quickly life can change," she replied. "A month ago, I was a desperate bride realizing her terrible mistake. Now, Abigail smiled softly. Now I have purpose again. I feel useful." "You're more than useful, Abigail. This place has come alive since you arrived. Sarah has someone to talk to besides us grumpy cowboys, and Marcus is amazed by your bookkeeping wizardry." "And what about you?" she asked, suddenly bold. "What do I bring to you, Mitch?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken feelings. Mitch turned to face her fully, his eyes reflecting the gold and crimson of the setting sun. "You remind me why I wanted to settle down in the first place," he said finally. "It wasn't just about the land or the cattle, it was about building something meaningful." Abigail's heart quickened. "And have you found that here?" "I'm beginning to," Mitch answered, his gaze never leaving hers. The moment was interrupted by Sarah calling them for dinner, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities neither had dared voice before. The following week brought trouble. A rider arrived from town with news that Theodore Wilkes had been seen asking questions about a woman matching Abigail's description. He was offering a reward for information about her whereabouts. "He won't give up," Abigail said that night, pacing the kitchen after the children had gone to bed. "Not until he's punished me for leaving." "He can't touch you here," Marcus assured her. "Everyone in the county knows the Brewers. No one will betray you to Wilkes." "But I can't stay hidden forever," Abigail argued. "What kind of life is that?" Mitch, who had been unusually quiet throughout the discussion, finally spoke. "You're right. You deserve better than living in fear." "What are you suggesting?" Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. Mitch stood, his decision apparently made. "I'm going to town tomorrow to speak with Sheriff Patterson. It's time Theodore Wilkes answered for his actions not just against Abigail but all his schemes." "That's dangerous, Mitch," Marcus warned. "Men like Wilkes don't play by the rules." "Neither do I when it matters," Mitch replied, his eyes meeting Abigail's across the table. "Some things are worth fighting for." That night, unable to sleep, Abigail found Mitch on the porch cleaning his revolver by lamplight. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, wrapping her shawl tighter against the night chill. "I do, though." Mitch set the gun aside and patted the space next to him. When Abigail sat down, he continued, "This isn't just about protecting you, though that would be reason enough." "Then what is it about?" Mitch took her hand gently, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "It's about standing for what's right. Wilkes has hurt people across 3 states with his confidence games. Someone needs to stop him." "Why does that someone have to be you?" "Because I can't ask you to build a new life while looking over your shoulder." Mitch's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "And because I hope you might consider building that life here with us." He paused. "With me." Abigail's breath caught. "Mitch." "You don't need to answer now," he added quickly. "I know it's too soon and you've been through hell, but I wanted you to know where I stand before I ride out tomorrow." Impulsively, Abigail leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and over almost before it began. When she pulled back, Mitch's expression was a mixture of surprise and something deeper, more profound. "Be careful tomorrow," she whispered. "Come back to me." Morning came too quickly. Mitch prepared to leave at dawn, saddling his horse while Abigail stood nearby, struggling to contain her fear. "Sheriff Patterson is an honest man," Mitch reassured her. "Once he hears the full story, he'll act, and Marcus sent word to the circuit judge who's due in town next week." "Theodore isn't alone," Abigail reminded him. He travels with those two men, the ones who helped him swindle my father's land. I'll be careful, Mitch promised, checking his saddlebags one final time. I should be back by tomorrow evening, but Mitch didn't return the next day or the day after. By the third day, Marcus was preparing to ride to town himself when a wagon appeared on the horizon. As it drew closer, Abigail recognized Sheriff Patterson driving with a bandaged Mitch seated beside him. She ran to meet them, heart in her throat. What happened? Sheriff Patterson, a weathered man with kind eyes, helped Mitch down from the wagon. Your former husband, I should say, didn't take kindly to being called to account. Mitch grimaced as he put weight on his left leg. There was a disagreement outside the saloon. Wilkes pulled a knife. Mitch disarmed him, the sheriff continued, but not before taking a nasty cut to the thigh. Dr. Jenkins patched him up, but he'll need rest. And Theodore? Abigail asked, supporting Mitch's weight as they moved toward the house. In my jail, along with his associates, Patterson replied with satisfaction. It turns out Wilkes was wanted in Wyoming for similar schemes. Once word got around town about what he'd done to you and others, witnesses came forward. The circuit judge will have plenty to work with when he arrives. Relief flooded through Abigail. So it's over, Mitch confirmed, his arm tightening around her shoulders. Wilkes won't be troubling anyone for a long while. That evening, after the sheriff had departed and Mitch was settled comfortably in the parlor, Abigail brought him a cup of coffee and sat beside him. You could have been killed, she said, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. But I wasn't, Mitch replied simply. And now you're free. Free, Abigail repeated, testing the word. I hardly remember what that feels like. It means you can choose your path now, whatever you want, wherever you want to go. Abigail studied him, the strength in his features, the honesty in his eyes, the way he had risked everything for her without expecting anything in return. I already know what I want, she said softly. Mitch set his coffee aside, his gaze questioning. And what's that, to stay here? To build something meaningful. She echoed his words from days before. With you, hope dawned in Mitch's eyes. You're sure? I don't have much to offer, just a cowboy's wages and a piece of land Marcus is holding for me up the valley. Abigail took his rough hands in hers. When I fled Willow Creek, I had nothing, empty hands and an emptier heart, but you saw something in me worth saving. I saw everything, Mitch corrected. Your courage, your intelligence, your kindness, and I've found the same in you. Abigail moved closer. I don't need riches or fancy promises. I need honesty, partnership, and someone who sees me for who I am. Mitch touched her cheek gently. When I said you held everything I need, I meant it. You brought purpose back into my life, Abigail, and you brought hope back into mine. Their kiss this time was deeper, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally parted, Mitch's smile was brighter than Abigail had ever seen it. I should probably court you properly, he said, a hint of mischief in his tone. Bring you flowers, ask permission to call on you. Abigail laughed, the sound light and free. I think we're beyond that, don't you? We've already survived a desperate escape, a cross-country journey, and a knife fight. Fair point, Mitch conceded, though Marcus might expect me to be more traditional. Sarah will set him straight, Abigail replied confidently. She's been matchmaking since the day we arrived. By summer's end, Abigail's annulment was finalized, and Theodore Wilkes had been sentenced to 5 years in territorial prison. Mitch's leg had healed completely, and they had begun building a small cabin on his land, just a mile from Marcus and Sarah's home. On a golden September afternoon, with the aspen leaves turning to flame across the mountainsides, Mitch and Abigail were married beneath an arch of wildflowers in the brewer's garden. The ceremony was simple but joyous, attended by neighbors who had welcomed Abigail into their community without question. I never thought I'd wear white again, Abigail confessed as they danced under lantern light that evening. Sarah had altered her own wedding dress for the occasion, and Mitch couldn't take his eyes off his bride. You deserve every happiness, Mitch replied, pulling her closer. And I intend to spend the rest of my days making sure you have it. "We'll build it together," Abigail corrected him. "That's what partners do." As the music played and stars appeared in the velvet sky, Abigail reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had fled into the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and terror in her heart. Now she stood in the circle of Mitch's arms, surrounded by people who had become family, with a future bright with possibility. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Brewer?" Mitch whispered in her ear. Abigail smiled up at her husband, her heart full to bursting. "I'm thinking that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you truly need." "And have you found it?" he asked, though the answer was already shining in her eyes. "I have," Abigail replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him as the fiddle played on and their friends cheered around them. "It turns out I'm holding everything I need right in these once empty hands." Years later, the Brewer Ranch would become one of the most prosperous in the county, known for its fine horses and innovative management, much of which was credited to Abigail's shrewd business sense. They would raise 3 children in the valley, teach them the value of honesty and courage, and never take for granted the love that had begun with an act of desperate escape and blossomed into a lifetime of shared dreams. And on quiet evenings, when the day's work was done and their children were tucked in bed, Mitch and Abigail would often sit on their porch watching the sunset, their hands clasped together no longer empty, but filled with everything that truly mattered.